Okay.
Cool. Well, we're going to quickly introduce ourselves. And Scott, why don't you start?
Great. Well, it's great to be here, and just such an honor that Brad has bestowed upon us. This has been something that is so fantastic and has such a long legacy. My name is Scott Sternberg. I serve as the Executive Director of the Boulder Economic Council. Essentially, it's the economic development arm of the Boulder Chamber of Commerce. So we are so focused on the startup community, certainly here at the university, but writ large within the Boulder area. Is such an important driver for us when you think about the R&D money that comes into the university and our community that ultimately spins out with organizations and great technology that we have here, which is what Boulder globally is known for. So it's a fantastic job, and I'm just thrilled to be with Sue here tonight to carry the torch of the variety show, although we may have started something with the gong show and the juggling that Brad is not going to be able to follow up on, but nonetheless, we're here.
She's up next.
So it's great to be here and great to see you all.
My name is Sue Heilbronner. I have a few hats, but just to let you know, because some of you are in school and you're thinking like the next job I get is going to be the most important and only thing I ever do in my life. I decided I wanted to be a federal prosecutor at the age of 11 at the Justice Department of the United States. I became that at the age of 33. And at the age of about 36, I decided this lawyer thing, not as fun as the internet. Oh my gosh. So I started a little business. It was a baby company, on an e-commerce baby company. I knew nothing about e-commerce, nothing about babies. But one friend, Pete Levitas, Ken, listen to this, one friend, I went out to dinner, and Pete Levitas, who was the most conservative financial guy I knew in my friend set, said, hey, if you have a vision of starting a startup, Sue, here's $10,000. He handed me a check outside Buca de Beppo, if some of you know of that. And that was the first yes I ever got in business, and I've never looked back. So first yes is really important. After doing that, I realized that law was more boring than business. So I switched careers, and I worked in a couple big corporations doing online biz dev, business development, sales, and M&A, and also some consumer brand licensing. After working at Discovery Communications, which is the TV company, lots of TV networks that everyone says they like, but nobody watches. After working there for about 5 years, I realized that that company was too big for a rebel like me. That was my story. And so I started doing startups where I could be as rebellious as I wanted, and spent about 10 years doing that. The last piece, two pieces. One is I did some executive coaching about 12 years ago with a very influential person who's now my friend, also lives in Boulder, Kaylee Klemp. And it really turned me on to this body of work called conscious leadership, which has been utterly life-altering for me. It's made me a really much more decent person, slightly less rebellious, but much more open-minded. And also about 10 years ago now, started an investment fund called MergeLane that was one of the first investment funds to focus on companies that had at least one woman in leadership. And very grateful to have made about 60 investments out of that fund. So that's me. And we have some thank yous here tonight. You all get to know a little bit better, each other better, and you'll get to know some amazing founders that are here with us. But first, just to thank the Silicon Flatirons team. You have all of their names.
I have the list. So I want to thank Nate, Shannon, Christine, and Sarah. Without their support and their knowledge and their experience, this just doesn't happen. So let's have a round of applause for those folks. And I can speak with authority in the sense that Silicon Flatirons exists due to the generosity of a wide range of sponsors. The Boulder Economic Council, the Boulder Chamber has been a long-time supporter of this activity and this organization. So thank you all. We won't list them all here today, but you know who you are, and the support organization that provides the funding and the resources to make these things happen is imperative for Brad and the organization's success. So thank you all to the supporters as well.
Awesome. So here's what we're going to do tonight. You're going to meet 5 startups. I don't even know if they're all startups. Some of them are startups. One of the things I love about startup events is that one of the companies, at least, that you're going to hear from is not really a startup anymore, but was sitting in the chair of some of the other founders that you're going to hear from tonight. Some of the founders you'll hear from tonight are on their first startup. A couple, at least, of the founders you're going to hear from tonight have done multiple startups and have that experience. So the idea is to bring variety. And tonight we're going to go from neuroscience to dating companies to outdoor apparel, which is pretty good range, got to admit. Plus we have juggling, so that really extends the range. And what we're going to do is Each of these founders, or there's one that's going to be two founders, are going to tell you about their business and a challenge that they're facing right now for about 5 minutes. And then you all are going to ask them whatever you want. So please ask whatever you want. And as you know, if you've been to a Silicon Flatirons event, and if you're new, you should know that the first question goes to a student. So you students don't disappoint us, and be ready with that first question.
Indeed.
And I think we're ready.
We're ready to go.
Let's do it. So I'm going to introduce our first founder. His name is Godard Abel. And I met Godard about 10 years ago at a conscious leadership retreat. And remember, I told you I was rebellious? Whoa. Yeah. So we went to this retreat, and Godard, who's now a dear friend, didn't really love authority so much. And he went to this retreat, which was led by other people, and he voluntarily went, he paid, and he flew across the country to go to it. And he was just extremely rebellious. And some people might have thought slightly disruptive. And at some point, Godard got himself kicked out of an Amelia Island retreat that he had paid for. If you ever read the book, The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, which is what some of my work and also the work Godard does at his company in terms of growing culture is drawn from, Godard is a female in that book, and the entire story is there. So you now have the inside track on the real story. Godard is the CEO of G2. It's not his first rodeo. He'll tell you all about it. Please welcome Godard Abel, who lives in Boulder.
Thank you, Sue, and I hope you don't kick me out tonight. But Sue has been my coach now for a few years, and I think thanks to her, I'm also less rebellious. So hopefully Scott doesn't have to escort me to the door. So the company I'm building, it is called G2. Yes, so I have the founder hoodie, and it is the place you go for software. And first, a little bit more about me. So I am now an older entrepreneur, kind of Sue's generation. And but I've been building companies now ever since 1999. And most of you students, well, some of you probably weren't alive, but that was an exciting time. The internet was brand new, .com boom and bust. And right now we have a kind of a slowdown in tech, but that was much worse. So hopefully this one won't get that bad. But ever since I've been building companies, they've all been business software companies, or people say SaaS, software as a service, which just means it's all delivered in the internet, which in 99 or 2000 was brand new. No one was doing that. So we built one company, Big Machine, sales quoting software, eventually was acquired by Oracle, although it was many years of struggle. Another one, SteelBrick, that was kind of the same thing, much faster success. That was bought by Salesforce. And then around that time, we also started G2, inspired by what we learned. And I also now love helping entrepreneurs, so I also invest myself. I'm chairman of two companies. One is called Logic. It's a next-gen configuration company, third generation. And 3Kit, that's a really cool 3D visualization AR company that I'm supporting. And I moved to Boulder 2.5 years ago with our kids. And actually most exciting to me, my boys, twin boys, are seniors at Boulder High, and they just got into CU. Oh. So I do hope you help recruit them. I said I'm gonna try to get Coach Prime to call them. But they're not football players, so I don't know if that's going to happen. But maybe you can help me get them to stay in Boulder. And why did we start G2? Well, I mentioned I've been a software entrepreneur for a long time. And frankly, we thought it was just way too hard to sell and buy business software. And my first company was a 10-year struggle. 3 years in, we were almost bankrupt. We'd raised 20 million in funding the first year based on .com hype, and 3 years later, we were almost bankrupt because it was really hard to sell our software. And the other challenge we saw was really hard for businesses to discover our software. We made niche software for big companies. Eventually, GE became a customer, Rolls-Royce, not the cars, but big turbines, big machines. And we helped them configure them, sell them online, but it was very kind of niche software. And I remember Rolls-Royce found us, and they said, we wish we discovered you 2 years ago. And so we thought, let's make buying business software more like consumer shopping. And obviously, as consumers, when we started G2, we were already buying everything on Amazon. We all used reviews, peer reviews, or we called it originally Yelp for business software. And one of our founding mantras was, why can you get more information on a $50 dinner on Yelp than you can get on $50,000 CRM software? And so G2, we set out to change that. And there's a big analyst in our world. Has anyone here heard of Gartner? Yes, I'm sorry. But they're a traditional analyst firm, and they write reports on software companies, but they only write them every 2 years. Very slow, very frustrating. And it's one analyst's opinion. And as a rebel, I hated that, one person grading me. We wanted our customers to speak for us, and that's why we started G2. And the other reality is software buyers. I've always been in software sales, but reality, it's kind of like used car salesmen. You know, people don't trust them. And so who do people trust? They trust their peers. And that's what the concept we use at G2. Clicker. There we go. And this is a very famous software entrepreneur, Brian Halligan. Some of you actually use HubSpot. Scott, you mentioned you did. He's the founder, CEO, great marketing software. And he's also always loved G2 because he sees that. And they've always all been about that. Like a marketer is not going to buy HubSpot because HubSpot gives them a great pitch. But if a peer marketer loves HubSpot, shares that, and HubSpot now has, I don't know, 20,000 reviews for marketers on G2 who all love HubSpot. And I think that's the premise. And it might seem in consumer shopping, it's like, yeah, no duh. That's how we find bars, restaurants. Now that's how we find our wives and husbands, apparently. But it didn't exist in business software. And now G2, we are very proud. We have become the place to go for software. Every year, there's about 80 million knowledge workers. There's 1 billion knowledge workers around the world. Not all of them are coming yet, but 80 million coming every year to find better apps to do their work. And now we have over 2 million trusted reviews. We just hit that milestone. But we do believe we're just getting started because the cool thing about software, you know, we're all hearing about AI. Have you all tried ChatGPT? Yes, it can do your homework for you, write your essays. I don't know what professors are going to do about that because it writes them probably better than any student would. And that's just showing the power of AI. And I think software is just getting started. And we think digital transformation, every business now, whether you're running a restaurant, manufacturer, everyone needs the right software. And so we just see huge potential if we can be that trusted place to connect software buyers and sellers online. And so thank you. Like I said, I'm excited to be here in Boulder now. Still just getting to know people here. Thank you, Sue, for inviting me. LinkedIn is probably my favorite platform. But I think we're gonna have some live questions, or do we do it after?
Yeah. So is there a student who has a question for Godard? Yep, back in the back.
So how do you go about building trust? Trust is a very intangible thing. So how do you go about bringing that forth for your company?
Yeah, and I think trust always starts with a human to human. You know, you trust another human, you trust a peer. And so I think one of the things we did on G2 to bring that trust into the digital world, at the beginning, we required all our users to sign up with LinkedIn. And because for most of us, especially in software and tech, it's our professional identity. And so if you know the person, right, in your LinkedIn connection, and then if you know the person and it's them saying it, then you're going to trust what they're saying. And so I think we're really trying to use the professional graph, the human connections. That, and we do also vet every review written on G2. We have 2 million, but we've rejected over 1 million. And so we do have QA, we do algorithms. We also have humans read every review and to try to filter out anything that's fake or suspicious or fraudulent. I think we do a pretty good job of that. So those are just 2 of the things we do to try to make sure people can trust the content on G2.
Great. Now you can be a student, but you don't have to. Who else has a question for Godard? Yep. Go.
First, thank you. This is an awesome story. It makes a lot of sense when you look back. Oh, I built this company. Rolls-Royce wish they could find it sooner. When you look back at your story, the dots all line up. But when you're at the front end of the story, it's hard to see where the dots are going. So what was your process like that could have led you to a lot of either first companies or the time you started this, second or third? Like, how did you iterate and find the next one and decide where you were going?
Yeah, and I think you're right, especially if you're a student. I remember actually I was a business student at Stanford in the late 90s, you know, when I got involved in entrepreneurship. And I think you're right, you only see the patterns in hindsight. But I think the first thing I remember I did, maybe a little bit like this event, but there was a random email to Stanford Business School email list, like 2 founders, Felipe and Mike. They're like, hey, we want a business student to help us. We're trying to start a company. They were software engineers. And I always say too bad it wasn't Larry and Sergey because they were starting Google at Stanford at that time. But these 2 entrepreneurs, they just needed some help. So one, I just started getting involved because I knew I wanted to do something entrepreneurship. I didn't know what. So I started kind of as a helper. And then that startup quickly was bought by a bigger startup, this very flamboyant entrepreneur, Farzad Dabachi, who'd worked for Larry Ellison at Oracle. And he kind of showed me, he raised like $200 million, took the company public in 2 years. So I'm like, oh, wow, you can do this much bigger, much faster. And then I was like, now I want to do my own thing because I learned a lot from these entrepreneurs. And then I really thought my father actually inspired my first business. And I knew the internet was going to be massive, and I didn't know what part of the internet, but my dad was in pump manufacturing, kind of obscure, making big pumps. And so then I went to see my father Thanksgiving '99. I'm like, Dad, do you think the internet is going to affect your business? He's also a rebel, so he said no. But then I kind of convinced him we could sell pumps like you could sell Dell PCs. And that was kind of like, then I had enough passion because I really wanted to help my dad sell his pumps online. I said, let's go do it, and started our own company. So that's kind of the backstory, at least to my first one.
Thanks. That's a great question. Who else has a question? One thing I like about questions in settings like this is to spend any story that your question has to be radically insightful to everyone here. Just imagine you could ask the most selfish question ever. And I find those questions to be really of service to almost everyone. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
You had me at selfish.
Products. We have a very, very tiny exclusive niche of software to monitor earthquakes, geophysical monitoring. And so probably never going to be bought by Salesforce or Amazon. How widely do you plan that pool to be?
And we do want to go into all the niches of software, because frankly, it's also one of the things Gartner doesn't do, and you might know Gartner. They only write like 250 reports or 250 categories of software, because they have to go after the big ones. But since our model is all digital, we can do many categories. We have over 2,000 already. And we also have vertical software, like we have like dry cleaning software, for example. Some bigger ones like restaurant software like Toast, but we do have our 2,000 categories, so I'd love to talk to you about it. You know, once there's 5 to 10 vendors in a category, then we like to create one, because obviously anyone, and what did you say it was called? Yeah, but anyone looking for that, you know, they want to find those solutions, so I'd love to talk to you about it, and maybe we can do it on G2.
And we'll wait for the mic so we're sure everyone can hear you. Thank you.
So will these reviews be searchable through Google? Because a lot of times when somebody's looking for software, they're trying to find Reddit reviews or something. And I can imagine that if it was globally available that way, you might get a lot broader viewership, but then it might be harder to monetize.
That's actually exactly, that's our primary strategy is Google. And I mentioned we have about 80 million people coming a year. Most of them come from Google. But for example, if you Google HubSpot reviews, G2 will be the #1 result. And so we do invest a lot in SEO because that's how most software buyers find us. Or when they're Googling someday earthquake software, also G2, right? So we target those keywords, CRM software, marketing software, both the categories and then the vendor brands and the term reviews and comparisons. So, but yes, SEO is very core to our strategy. Most of our content is free, which you're right, initially made it harder to monetize, but now it's starting to be a good business. But you have to be more patient, because most of it's available for free.
So can I ask how you are monetizing it?
Yes, we have now, I think, 3,300 software vendors as customers. And we give them what we call a marketing solution. And so your basic profile on G2 is free, or if you're familiar with Glassdoor, it's kind of similar. A Glassdoor recruiter can upgrade their profile, put in more content. Same thing on G2. If you want to put in your own demos, your videos, your CTAs. Plus we give them data to let them know which businesses are shopping for what type of software right now so they can better target them through ads. And finally, we give them content. Like if they want to use our reviews, we publish our own reports. We're about to do our best of. But if they want to use our own, it's a bit like JD Powers for car companies. Now you see that in software ads, like, hey, it's not just HubSpot saying we're #1, but HubSpot, we're #1 based on 20,000 G2 reviews. So if they want to use us in their marketing campaigns, they also pay us for that.
We'll let that be our last question. Thank you so much, everybody joining me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. We're off to a great start without any more juggling. So this is fantastic. So I'm just really excited to introduce our next speaker. In many ways, tonight is about connections. We just heard about connecting buyers to sellers in the software space. We're talking about emotional connections and literally later on about physical connections. Our next speaker is going to talk about global connections to the startup community. And I'm just so proud to have Eboni J.D. Freeman here because, first of all, you are the Arts and Cultural Commissioner here for the city of Boulder in your, quote, day job, I guess I'm saying. Just to give you a perspective, Boulder ranks extremely high in terms of our arts and cultural per capita. So it's a fantastic job. So thank you so much for all the work you do to give Boulder that weirdness, that edge, and that vibe, and that artistic creative culture. But tonight, she's here to talk about the Watson Institute. And it's a unique system, network, and connection mechanism that draws entrepreneurs together. And I just want to read something because I found this to be fantastic. Find your community, discover your calling, and accelerate your career. Gosh, we all want that, right? So we're so excited to have Eboni here. So let's welcome her to hear a little bit about the Watson Institute.
Hi. Thank you so much, Scott. Well, hi, my name is Eboni Freeman. I love that you started off with rebellion because I hope this is a bit rebellious. So I started out at Google here. That was what brought me to Boulder about 4 years ago. Had an amazing time. Helped build their first Boulder startup weekends in partnership with Techstars, which Sue mentioned earlier, and you won't believe it. But for 2 years in a row, the best presenters were from Watson Institute. Who in the world is Watson Institute? Why do they bring such amazing people to Boulder? These are the questions that led me to the world of impact as a service. Now, we have that terrible part of the presentation where I'm gonna look at my phone and read from it, but we're gonna all make it through, okay? Okay, but first I'll read the screen. We have 349 alumni from 68 countries. How many people have visited more than 10 countries? Oh, okay, y'all kind of well traveled. Okay, but nonetheless, you haven't been to 68, but we have effectively been to it with our 349 alumni, and they've raised more than $175 million. Okay, who's raised more than 100 million? Darn it, all right, I'll get you on one of them. And then we've also created over 1,500 jobs. Okay, has anyone done that? Oh my gosh. Okay, well, we're gonna have to have a chat afterward because I'm gonna need to bring you in as a mentor.
Perfect.
So Watson Institute combines non-traditional education curriculum with its community engagement ecosystem to enable private, public, and social sector organizations to help solve the world's toughest problems. Didn't we hear something about earthquakes earlier? I think you might need to apply. So when we're talking about impact as a service, it really is a business-to-business model that we're working with here. We provide our partners, who you can see their lovely little logos on the left-hand side, in-country representation. So when Ford Motor Company Fund, Truist Foundation, a large bank in the southeast of the US, I know we're in Colorado, so you probably haven't heard of them, or the Western Union Foundation, when they are wanting to expand their impact globally and not just increase their profit, really head for that triple bottom line, who do they call? Watson Institute. And we provide them with the ability to reach out to the top entrepreneurs in countries like El Salvador, Kenya, China. Name a few more for me. Come on now. Germany, yep, we had one from Germany. We had one from England, yeah.
Nigeria.
Woo, okay, yeah, you got it, great. Everything you just said. And then we're moving on to the tools, the network and experience. That's a big part of what we serve on a platter at Watson Institute. Because yeah, it's great to be connected with really smart people, but what does it matter if you're not doing anything? So we provide the tools in terms of education. Remember, we read that a little bit earlier. The network, we love partnering with organizations like CU Boulder. We have had so many of our fellows attend the events here. So if you haven't attended, if this is your first one, make sure you go to a few more. And the experience, another exciting part of the Watson Institute Fellowship is our base camps. You know, I could tell you about it now, or you could ask me about it later. The final piece of this pie is the community impact, because every time we touch one fellow, we don't just touch one fellow. They go out into their communities and share the knowledge that they learned. They come to Boulder for 3 weeks, do their program virtually for 14 weeks, and then spread it around their country. And for our partners, because remember we started out talking about this was B2B. So what do our partners get at the end of this? Besides that feel-good feeling that they helped all these amazing countries, they also get a data-backed CSR report. Now, how many folks work in CSR at ESG?
Can you define those terms, please?
I'm gonna do you one better. This lovely lady in the blue jean jacket is gonna tell me what CSR stands for. Oh yeah, she did. Did anyone know what ESG stands for?
Close.
You are so close, I feel it. Anyone else? There we go. Can we have the mic lovely person come? Thank you so much. And the person who just, you did it right. So don't be confident right now, okay? Yeah, you got it. Okay, I love it. But they are getting these data-backed, measurable, impact-driven reports that tell their stockholders, okay, you know how we just spent $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 not on business software, but actually to help some founder in Nigeria? Well, this is what happened. And I think that's the special piece is when we can move, when we combine qualitative and quantitative data. So, you heard my presentation and you're wondering, how can I learn more about Watson Institute? Well, I have quite the event for you. And February 15th, Wednesday, 1 or 2 away from now, you are going to have the chance to climb the summit. Summit is our demo day, our showcase event, the best day of your year. And it's going to be from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, and where you're going to be able to hear the right idea from the right person at the right time. Didn't I hear there were some investors in the crowd? Don't you have a bit of trouble spending your money correctly occasionally? Don't worry, I got you. Well, if you have a phone, I'm one of those people, you've seen it already. I'm one of those presenters that I'm gonna come at you. So if you have your phone, can you pull it out? We can wait. Yeah, okay. You pulled out your phone? We're making eye contact right now. You can't deny it. And I want you to pull out your camera on your phone. And then I want you to take a picture of this. Woo! Yes! Woohoo! So don't miss your front seat to the future. And if you find yourself with a few questions, feel free to email me at eboni@watson.is. Thank you so much, and I'm open to questions.
Awesome. So fitting with standards, students get the first crack at a question. Oh, come on. So since you made eye contact, I'm pointing on you. No? No?
Yeah, I guess. So who are the that are
Ah, perfect question. The question was, where do we find these amazing founders? Well, we have a fantastic partner network and ecosystem across the globe. So we work with amazing folks in China, Nigeria, all those great countries you mentioned earlier, both with their colleges, their local nonprofit centers, their chambers of commerce. And we actually ask for recommendations. Because all of you are associated with CU Boulder, one of the greatest universities on the earth, you kind of have an in. So if you want to apply, just email me. But yeah, we find folks through great partner networks, including university systems. Any other questions?
Questions? There's one in the back there.
Are the businesses you typically work with or who are in your fellowship like nonprofits or for-profits, or what kind of businesses do you usually interact with?
I couldn't have planted these questions better. We work with about a 50%, 50-50 nonprofit and for-profit. And part of the reason we do that is that we think that the combination of those two types of venture-minded folks in the same room, learning the same curriculum, but applying it to different problems with different business models actually amplifies the ability of everyone to accelerate their business and their personal development.
Question up front, and then we'll get to you in a second.
I want to know where you went to theatrics school.
Thank you so much. I attended the fantastic Emory University Goizueta Business School, where I studied strategy and management consulting.
I learned to juggle in the physics department. Just so.
Oh.
Question over there.
So if you're gonna invest in a company, how much stake do you guys usually take? And like,
Perfect question. So if you are worried about these predatorial accelerator programs stealing all your money, Watson Institute isn't like that. We don't take any of your money. We give you money, up to $6,000 in seed funding from the corporate sponsors that we mentioned earlier.
with no equity?
oh my gosh, we would feel horrible about taking your equity. We want you to keep it and grow it and come back as a mentor for us.
Thank you.
Well, maybe I'll ask the last question. Just a quick question. Can you give us an idea of the number of people who work for the organization? Because often not-for-profit organizations or institutes such as yours is widely diverse and spread across a lot of pro bono volunteer and engagement work. So can you give us an idea of how large the organization is?
Depends on which day you're asking. I think we're about 23 folks strong right now, and maybe 200 volunteers at least. So if you've been wondering where to spend that extra 2 hours of your month to make yourself feel good in your heart,
So think about that for a second. 23 employees with 200 volunteers, and the statistics, if you go back to that slide, with the number of alumni, the number of dollars that you've raised, and the number of jobs that you've created, and you talk about impact as a service, that's outstanding and amazing. So thank you so much for sharing your story tonight. So now we're going to pivot, a different type of connection here tonight. I was struggling with how I can actually introduce this concept because it's absolutely fantastic. You know, I've had some background in neurosciences, and I just have difficulty wrapping my mind about what Afference is actually, trying to achieve here. So imagine the tragedy of losing a limb or a digit and trying to reproduce that aspect of a feeling. And this is what these folks are trying to achieve and are achieving here. So it's my pleasure to introduce Jacob Segil from Afference to talk about this, a different type of connection that your business is striving to. So Jacob, let's welcome Jacob.
Thanks. Well, this is fun. We're going to have a wide variety tonight because Afference is completely different from what we've heard about so far. But brief introduction, I'm Jacob Segil, co-founder of Afference. I'm also faculty. On this campus, I'm faculty in mechanical engineering. And then at night, I get to play with Afference. That's changing shortly because we did just get our first funding in the door and we're ready to go. So what we're doing here at Afference is that we're neuroscientists who know how to create artificial perception. So what we're building out is our wearable technologies so that we can stimulate your nervous system and create the sense of touch for objects that aren't there. Where we're going to use this is, of course, in our new metaverse. Has anyone been to the metaverse yet? I'm still looking there. The signs aren't built yet for how to get there, but we're interfacing with VR, XR, headsets, right? So that those digital objects that you're manipulating now can have mechanical integrity. You can feel them, and so the backstory here, which is the fun part, right, for us tonight, is that my co-founder and I have worked for years, me maybe 10, 15 years, and for Dustin, more like 20, 25 in the prosthetic limb industry. We're researchers, academics who build prosthetic devices, hands, fingers, limbs. And then Dustin specifically has been in the role of plugging them back into the body. So that means, how do you recreate the sense of touch if you've lost your hand? Long story short, 20 years later, after it started in cats, or mice, and cats, and now humans, there are amputees at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, who can put on a hand, grab an object, and feel that object. The way we're doing it is with peripheral nerve stimulation, and so we won't go too far into our neurophysiology tonight, but there are wires in your body connecting your skin, your hands, to your brain. They're electrical, just like all of our systems here today. And so if you can send electricity down that wire and it reaches your brain in the right pattern, in the right shape, your brain thinks it's sensation, it thinks it's touch. So a lot of work, a lot of time, but really Dustin, I think, has the sort of the world-leading neural interface to recreate the sense of touch. And we're translating that work into Afference. The hard part there is that it's been done so far in an implanted sort of system. That means a surgeon has to open up the body, find the nerve, cuff it, and then close it all back up. 6 weeks of rehabilitation. It's not something we would do in order to play video games. At least I won't. It makes a whole lot of sense if you're an amputee, but not, of course, in this market where we're going. And so our challenge, right, is to do it in a wearable form factor. That means in a, you know all the same wearables, gloves, watches, rings, but what we need is access to your nerves. And believe it or not, they're right under the surface. Anyone hit their funny bone? Right, that's your ulnar nerve. It's right here in your elbow. And so that's our challenge here at Afference. We are, when you talk about trust, connection, all those things, this is going to be core to our mission here too. So we're starting in this gaming sector, right? It's for entertainment purposes. But then what we think we can do is go further because we don't think the world will be constrained to two-dimensional screens for very much longer, right? Our digital content will be displayed to us in three-dimensional formats, and we won't need it it won't be just living in our pocket anymore. Text message is going to come up right here, and then you can type away, swipe away, deny the call from your, from your friend who's bugging you about some homework assignment or something else. And we can interact with those three-dimensional objects just with the same dexterity that we have with our physical. We know in our work, neural engineering and neuroscience, that this idea of embodiment or presence, or in this metaverse age, they're calling it immersion. The way we actually get there is with visual tactile information coming in a synchronous and congruent manner. That's a lot of scientific jargon to say. It needs to look and feel appropriately. And so right now, all of our digital content is, it's doing, visual and auditory information. We have sight and sound coming to us. But in order to get to that level of immersion or embodiment that a lot of our leaders in the field think Facebook changing their name to Meta, that they're trying to push that new vision, and they're going to need tactile information to get there. So we're building, starting now, January 1st, to quit my job. And we're going to see how far we can take it. That's what I have for you tonight.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We have an immediate hand that goes up over here.
Hi. Have you heard of Tuvalu and how they were replicating their island in the metaverse? Like, do you have any thoughts regarding that as an opportunity? And you mentioned talking about utilizing this in the gaming sphere, but have y'all thought about the potential social impacts related to climate change and preservation of culture with the platform, and not the platform, but what you're working on?
I have not. We're so early here that I don't know how many different places it can go. What I can tell you is that there's to recreate these ideas, to recreate our lives, the world that we live in, right, into a digital format. In order for our brains to believe it, we're going to need more than just visual and auditory information. And so that's the part I understand well. I don't know exactly. I can't follow all everything going on with our metaverse.
Okay.
But I if you see connections, then let's keep talking. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because Tuvalu was gonna, I think it was by 2100, it'd be completely submerged in one of the first impacts of climate change. So that was their plan. For anybody else who didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Yeah. Very good.
Question down here.
I was just wondering how you guys were able to raise funding despite being so early. I was wondering what your product or minimum viable product that you showed investors was and how you convinced them.
Yeah, good. Great question. I don't really know how to measure whether we're so early or not. Like I said, 25 years of work has gone into the patent portfolio that's licensed out of the university. It's 12, granted patents, 12 more in filing. We have a prototype, it works. to gloves built by grad students. God bless them. And it's you know, so yeah, and then we know a lot about, we know how to do these things, right? So we know how to build products. I've done 3 other medical device startups, so we know how to create hardware, create products. This is not medical, right? This is not a healthcare company, but those standards and those, call it demands we've seen before. And then Dustin is a world leader in neural interfaces, a member of the National Academy of Inventors. He's, you know, you spin all that stuff together, and it wasn't straightforward, but we were able to fund it for now. Now we have a lot more work to do, but that's the game. That's the game we sign up for.
That's dope. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. So from what you've explained, it sounds more leaning towards mixed reality as of now, but based on certain reports, especially Ericsson published one last year that says the world is moving towards Internet of Senses. Do you see your startup heading in that direction or just sticking with mixed reality?
Well, yeah, but tell me, what do you mean by Internet of Senses? What's the difference?
So the concept with Internet of Senses is that when you can taste things without actually, you won't have a slice of pizza, but you would be able to taste a slice of pizza. Again, neurohacking of sorts. Similarly, you'll be able to, like, especially for marketing purposes, if you're trying to sell a perfume and a customer can smell it just through the advertisement, because they're triggering some sensors or because there are variables that trigger those parts of their brain that can reproduce it without it actually being there. So that's what Internet of Senses is essentially.
Great. Well, I'm all for it. We know how to do that for your sense of touch. And so that is, and we know a lot about other prosthetic devices, right? Cochlear implants, retinal implants. These are all within our academic space, right, of rehabilitation. I've seen all those talks too. The unique part about, here's the fun part. I'm going to go down a quick rabbit hole.
Oh man,
consciousness is my favorite topic. Like the idea of an embodied agent, that we are in control of our own selves, and our selves have boundaries, right? The reason this table is not myself is because I don't have sensation coming from it to my brain. But as soon as I plug something in that I can feel, and I can see and touch in synchrony and in congruent manners, then I start to embody it. And so what's unique about touch is that it actually affects our own self of sense and our own consciousness more so than other senses like taste or smell. And so we think it's wildly powerful. Our evidence of it is when we work with amputees. And these are, there's my email. Lots of good YouTubes to share. The one that I share the most is when Dustin's group was interviewed by PBS NewsHour. I'm sure you all watch nightly, is that right? This is a year ago. They come into the lab and they interview one of the amputees about when he first wore his prosthetic hand with the sensation turned on, so he could feel his own hand again. What he said was the most impactful part was that he could hold his wife's hand again, which is remarkable. But me being the scientist in the room says, but he still has another hand. He's a unilateral amputee. He's been able to hold his wife's hand this whole time, right? Just with one, not the other. And so we've talked about that for hours on end in our lab and everything else. What was notable was that he felt whole again. It's this idea of wholeness, and it's the fact that his brain was receiving sensation from the hand that he had lost. And so wholeness is created with touch, not other senses. That's why I like it best. Yeah.
I hate to do this, but in the interest of time, we have the microphone with one last question there. And then I would say for those of you who will raise your hands, let's save the questions for after that. We'll convene in the lobby to answer those questions. It's actually behind you. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Does this have much to do with the phantom limb syndrome? And I'm not sure, there's interoception and various types of senses of orientation. Is that?
1 minute answer.
Oh, good. I love all those. I love all those topics too. Phantom limb syndrome, right, is not a factor when we're dealing with right amputation. Not, of course, when we're dealing with wearable devices like Afference is building. And interoception is even cooler. Those are the subconscious sensations that are being received by your brain that you're not even aware of. It's like your heartbeat, your blood pressure, all those things are being measured, but I can't tell you what my heart rate is right now, but my brain knows. And so we've done some cool experiments in that space where we pattern the stimulation based on those interoceptive signals. The brain thinks it's yourself, not somebody else. Very cool stuff. I'll be in the hall. We can talk all night. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome stuff. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to pivot into a different connection, and that's the connection between our skin writ large and the environment. A great quote that, well, I'll just take credit for it. I said it. There was an article that was written that talked about Pearl Street being the Rodeo Drive of Boulder. And I said, no, Rodeo Drive is the Pearl Street of Beverly Hills, right? So, all you have to do is walk up and down Pearl Street and you can see just the explosion of the outdoor industry in the context of outdoor apparel. So we're really fortunate to have Trent Bush here, who comes from generations, if you will, of the outdoor industry, and just such a great resource, for us here. And what's fantastic is you call your company ARTILECT Studios, and we'd love to hear a little bit more about how you got started and what your focus is here. So let's welcome Trent Bush to the conversation.
The clicker?
Yep, and you can have the clicker.
Very much. Cool. Yep, Trent Bush. Yeah, I've been in Boulder my whole life. I've got a slide on that. I am a buff. I'm a freshman. And I took a gap year in 1991. And so if I went back, I'd have to live in the dorms, I think. So to talk about a little bit about that. So probably one of the few people still around, fourth generation Boulder, myself. My kids are fifth generation Boulder High, go Panthers. And I just want to talk real quick about place and about what that means, I think, in founding companies and becoming a sort of that sort of entrepreneurial spirit. And I think Boulder is a really important place, and you can see it in the room, of course, and sort of the collisions that happen in Boulder, and it's a really interesting kind of place. And so I think I just wanted to kind of mention it because you guys are all in the right place, especially if you want to start something new, start something yourself, and pay attention, meet people, and really be part of that, because it's that collision of sort of technology and environmentalism and education and science and all of these things that happen in Boulder, which are really cool, which we just found out. Sue was talking. Another collision, I just realized that she was neighbors with my parents, which is pretty wild. So that's how small of a town Boulder is. My great-grandparents came here for mining. Mines shut down. My great-grandfather opened a bar, which is that one right there, which is where Billabong is downtown, if you guys know where that store is. My grandfather, after World War II, came back and opened a restaurant where Mustard's Last Stand is right now. And where this kind of tucks into my story, besides just having generations of sort of this entrepreneurial spirit, my dad, who's the guy kind of leaning against, and that's NCAR, if you can tell it's NCAR. He worked at NCAR opening day back in the 60s, and he and a crew of people working there kind of broke into the fabrication lab and made backpack frames and tent frames. And he went home and set it up in his front yard, and a guy drove by named Dale Johnson, who was a outdoor industry Boulder sort of mainstay, and kind of hired him on the spot. So it's a really interesting sort of background of Boulder in general and kind of that entrepreneurial spirit that comes out of here. A lot of startups, of course, and founders come from here. Where that kind of plays into me, I grew up, I'm the kid on the skateboard, again at NCAR, but I was born into the outdoor industry, as Scott kind of said. I started my first brand. I started working at a skateboard, snowboard shop, kind of being the rebellious kid that I was in the 80s on the hill, right around the corner from the sink. Started my own brand in high school with my brother and a couple friends. Dropped out of, started at CU, and because technology wasn't a thing yet, and I was in design, decided to drop out and start my own clothing company. And in the time from then until now, which has been a very long time, I've gotten to start a few different brands over the years, and I've also worked for some of the biggest brands. So I have a pretty big, broad view And that has all kind of come into play. So I'm going to start just with the problem piece real quick, and then I'll kind of talk about how my solution came out. Last few years, so outdoor athleticism has risen at an incredible pace. The opposite of skiing used to be golf, but now the opposite of skiing, and especially like backcountry skiing and that kind of thing, is more mountain biking, trail running, that kind of thing. So this athleticism level has gone up greatly. But at the same time, environmental regulations have really risen necessarily, which is great. But what that has sort of ended in is that the performance of apparel systems have gone down. So there's this big thing happening right now, and it's really interesting because in most technologies, things are always on the up and up. But because of these environmental regulations, there's a class of chemicals called PFAS, which are forever chemicals, which never go away. They were developed in the 50s and 60s, and they'll be with us for the rest of our lives. So what's happening right now in the outdoor industry in particular, where it's supposed to be this industry of really interesting, always progressive, always progressing, we're about to find a situation where we're regressing. And things like Gore-Tex, things like Event will be banned in 2 years because of this class of chemicals being banned. The brands won't be banned. They'll come up with newer, greater things, but we're heading off a cliff right now of performance. So that's where I came in with ARTILECT. And again, it's taking this concept and idea of working with in a long span of performance and performance outdoor. And so the name itself, like you said, it's equal parts art and intelligence. And we create this sort of innovation-driven performance apparel systems for people and the planet. We do that through something called ACES, which is sort of this idea of integrated systems and apparel systems skinned through in the environment. We call it ACES for short, and that's something that we align the fit so all the products work together really well. But the sort of USP for what we do is that we create these apparel systems from the ground up, and then we also align technologies within. We talk about technology a lot in other industries, but it's actually something that's really a push right now in performance apparel. The other kind of thing that I always think of is the term, it's the human, not the hardware. And people will spend any amount of money on their ski setup or their bike or whatever just to get that performance advantage, when actually if you really paid more attention to the human body and its performance, you would find a much bigger and greater sort of benefit right there. We do this through a whole number of things. We have 5 levels of ACES. We work with a bunch of the world's sort of most leading companies in creating these PFAS-free product categories from the ground up that work really from this sort of idea that we talked about of equal performance from the outside in and then the inside out. Click. There we go. We also take a holistic view because it's not just the pieces and parts of the materials that we put in that we have to make the best decisions on the front end. But we also look at, again, that kind of holistic view of what is responsible and what is sustainable in the outdoor industry. And in apparel is the second biggest sort of polluter industry in the world, especially when it comes to clean water and those kinds of things. So we really have to think about those all the way through. So we've also developed some big innovations with YKK, the biggest zipper technology company in the world, where we're actually doing user repairable zippers and those kinds of things. So you can actually keep your product in the field longer and also repair them if anything does go wrong. So this is kind of where we get to, is we're designed for performance and kind of never for compromise. We take a user-centric view instead of taking price point and margin and all the things that are very important, but usually tend to funnel you down into a certain amount of lack of value maybe. We actually go the other way, and we use the sort of customer experience and their performance experience first, balanced again with trying to be more responsible for the planet. And then we charge what it's worth. So it's a little bit different take than a lot of companies. We do a lot of things to prove those out. We just did a quick Chasing the Light, which was Antarctic expedition, which was really, really cool. 57 days, 1,400 miles unsupported. We've supported that. We've won all kinds of awards recently, and we're just 2 years old because we started during COVID. So that's it. That's what we're doing. It's a little different again than maybe the Silicon Flatiron sort of mentality, but we make real things in the real world for those real experiences.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Real things in the real world for real experiences.
Well, yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, questions? Oh, over here. We have. little bit of time for a couple of questions here.
Hi, that was really cool. I was wondering about your supply chain. Since you started during the pandemic, I assume it's always been, you're laughing, so maybe it's not breezy, but what does that look like since you're kind of trying to take a new approach to
It's been a whole new experience, a whole new learning experience. Things had, I think the whole world, especially supply chain wise, has become so efficient and moved to efficiency over decades that any little thing going wrong became a really, really big issue. So especially during the pandemic, and we launched during the pandemic, which was, all right timing, but not the best. China in particular was hit way early, where we make in Vietnam and in India was actually delayed kind of a year. So the things that we thought were happening sort of Asia-wide weren't. They were happening in China first, and the shutdown kind of happened in China. And then that moved over to Vietnam, and factories were shut down. We had fabrics stuck places and had to get them sort of extricated out. And then if you could finally get product made, then the backup, of course, in all the ports. I mean, it was definitely a nightmare. And the other thing is too, luckily I had enough experience working with factories and with these materials and all this stuff over years, but we've done this whole thing. I still have not yet gone back to one of our factory partners, and it's been almost 3 years. I just traveled I went to Japan over Christmas, but we do zippers and fabrics there, but we don't do the manufacturing. So it's been a learning curve. There was no playbook for that, and we're just doing our best to kind of get through it, but it has gotten much better recently.
Question up front.
Wondering what the process is for analyzing an individual athlete for what their needs are, and how do you tailor that?
So that was a lot of it's anecdotal. There's not as much, testing, because for the most part it's really, really expensive. So you have to know athletes and know what they're doing, and can you improve their performance? They judge themselves or measure themselves a lot. There's Strava, there's all kinds of things that happen. You can get that sort of anecdotal evidence. You can do the things that Chasing the Light Antarctica expedition was NASA, European Space Agency, Hewlett-Packard. So that was a huge piece of human data collection. They were looking at both environmental change, but also human data. And so it's not usually the first thing brands spend money on. I mean, the Nikes of the world have big labs and the whole thing, but then they still go back into what's commercially viable. So some of the things they come up with aren't always commercially viable. We're doing a study with, hopefully, with US Air Force, their Strong Lab at Wright-Patterson, to put our apparel system kind of head-to-head against the XWIX system and see what's better. So that's super exciting, and hopefully we'll do that this year. Yeah.
That's great. It's kind of hard to believe, though, in the spirit of rebels, Trent and I were talking about our first skateboards. And then when the first time we saw someone snowboard, we were sharing that. It's kind of hard to believe that we were rebels back then.
We're rebels.
When we were riding the
Remain
skateboard
rebels.
and snowboard. So
yeah.
fantastic the way the industry has evolved. So let's thank Trent and get on to our last group here.
Thank you.
Okay. So when this company launched pretty recently, you might have read about them in essentially any publication, period. Like the sexiest online thing that I don't even know the name of, all the way to NPR and major media outlets. I don't know how they did it. It was just the two of them. But I want to tell a quick story about why I got so excited when your mom posted it on Facebook, in case you think Facebook and moms are irrelevant. So, this is not a sad story, it's a happy story. I have not led the most conventional romantic life. In fact, I've been on online dating since the beginning of online dating and met a million amazing people. I feel incredibly grateful for online dating. All right, happy story. About 2 years ago, when I was looking for the man I'm dating now, I had just had brain surgery. And I just didn't want to drive at night down 93, because nobody should ever drive at night down 93. But I also have a minor, tiny little vision impairment. So I texted this person and I said, I know we were going to meet up here and you want to meet down there, but I don't really want to drive at night on 93. And he wrote back and said, well, yeah, Grandma, I've got your night vision goggles waiting for you. And that is why Dateability really landed with me. Please meet Alexa and Jacqueline Child from Dateability.
Yeah, hello. Hi, I'm Alexa. This is my sister, Jacqueline, and we are the co-founders of Dateability. We are the only dating app for the disabled and chronically ill communities.
So I became disabled due to my chronic illnesses in high school. And despite growing up in monotonous Telluride, I didn't face a lot of ableism. I then graduated from Colorado College and moved to Denver. And as all you Coloradans know, people place a lot of importance on living an active lifestyle. And when you're disabled, you can't always be active. So whenever I had to explain to someone that, you know, I couldn't ski every weekend or hike the 14ers or go rock climbing after work, I panicked. And, you know, I also faced a lot of the same comments. I was told from the get-go to not have kids, not pass down my disabilities to my future offspring, or that I was just too burdensome to be in a relationship with. And so for years, I really tried, you know, the mainstream dating apps, always unsuccessful, always met with rejection. I would be Googling for all these other dating apps for people like me. Nothing existed. I couldn't believe it. And so in 2021, we launched Dateability.
2022.
2022.
We're in 2023.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, so I watched Jacqueline go through these devastating experiences, and it broke my heart. She is beautiful, smart, kind, and has so much to offer the world and a person. And this one thing she can't control about her is just preventing her from giving and receiving love. And she's not alone. There are 61 million disabled adults in the United States. That is 25% of our population. They make up the largest minority in our country. And that number is even larger when you factor in chronic illness, when you factor in long COVID from the pandemic. So we know that everyone out there is unfortunately experiencing similar situations and dating woes. And so we created Dateability to change those experiences in the dating game for a community that is so deserving and worthy of love.
So not only does our mission make Dateability different than any other dating app, but we also have a section on every profile called Dateability Deets. And you know, we want to present disability and chronic illness and any sort of condition one may have as something neutral. So when you put your race or your height, your education level, those are all pretty neutral terms. And we hope that Dateability Deets neutralizes, normalizes, and destigmatizes disabilities. It's a long list of broad terms. We don't include any diagnoses, but terms that, such as service animal, mobility aid, or limb difference. And they're just on your profile. And it's a great conversation starter. And it really makes disclosing your disability less anxiety inducing, because it can be really, really hard to tell someone that, oh, you know what, I do have a mobility aid, or, you know, I can't stand up in front of a crowd and give a presentation, so I need a seat. So it's been a really great asset to Dateability for our users.
And we launched end of October 2022, and so far, we haven't paid for any marketing yet, and we've got about 200 new users a week. We have been featured in the Washington Post, USA Today, and on NPR, and that's what we attribute a lot of our growth to. But we are looking at 2023 as being the year we really go viral in the best way possible. We are currently raising our pre-seed round to launch phase 2. So we have a minimum marketable product. We have a pretty solid product. It's gone through many updates, a lot of testing, a lot of user feedback, but we want to launch phase 2 with a subscription model as well as a friendship logic. So we have heard from a lot of people who are disabled, who are in romantic relationships, that they have trouble finding platonic relationships. Either their able-bodied friends they drifted apart, or they just have trouble finding friends due to a lack of shared experience, empathy, and understanding. And so we think adding in the ability to just make friends in addition to romantic relationships is really going to be a beneficial thing for the disability community.
Yeah, so Dateability's foundation is based on accessibility. So Dateability is free and will always have a free version no matter how we expand. And Dateability is also available to download on iOS, Android, and to be used on a web application so that people can use their desktops or laptops for accessibility purposes.
In addition, we hope to use Dateability's platform to advocate for gender equality, marriage equality, and actual universal and affordable healthcare. But at the end of the day, ultimately, Dateability is here to make love accessible. Thank you.
Anyone have like a feeling in their body, make love accessible? Isn't that good? That's so good. All right, student first. Who has a question?
I know dating apps aren't that a huge innovation, but.
Hey, don't take yourself down
really.
after all that. That was awesome.
But you didn't let me finish. But a dating app for the disabled and chronically ill community is the only one out there.
Cool.
Hey, thank you all for that presentation. I was wondering kind of how you first started to market the product. I know that like dating apps kind of notorious for really hard to start up because you have to have a specific community that you're, all within one area. So was it targeted at a certain like area first, or kind of how did you first make that first initial jump to get users?
So we pushed really hard on the press front. We were relentless in finding press. And so our first piece was done in the Washington Post, which we felt really proud of. And that just bumped us right up to people knowing about our name and giving us some brand recognition. And we didn't even announce Dateability until about 3 weeks before we launched. We knew that this is a competitive market and there are probably these big names and big software developers who could easily tweak something to make it for disabled people. And we know that the most successful companies targeted for the disabled community are ones run by the disabled community. And so that is a really big factor for us, and that has been a really strong suit, is that I can say, I'm a member of this community, I'm on the app, I'm making this for myself and for everyone else.
And I will say, to add to that briefly, we are available in North America, so Canada, Mexico, and United States. Right now, we do have the location function turned off so that you can see, to make it a better user experience. So you're not just going on and seeing like 3 people in Denver. You see every user as long as they match your gender and sexual orientation preferences on the app. And it's been cool. Somebody said that they look to Reddit for software reviews, and I do the same for our own app. And it's really cool to see all different people who know about Dateability across the country.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks.
There's a question back there, and we'll go next to the back row there.
Hi, that was a very interesting presentation. The first thing that came to mind was, are there HIPAA disclosures that are built into this?
The lawyer kid, I'm the lawyer,
answer.
so. No, we do not ask for any medical diagnoses. And, wheelchair user, mobility aid, deaf, those are just descriptors and they're not diagnoses. So there is no HIPAA. We did at the beginning when we were creating this app, wondering if we should limit it to just disabled people. And we came across 2 things. One, that would be very hard to verify. How does someone verify that they're disabled? That probably would go into some kind of HIPAA territory and privacy policies. And 2, as an app that is inclusive and prides itself on its inclusivity, there are able-bodied and non-disabled people who are familiar, have friends, family members like myself who are disabled and are willing and able and fine with dating a disabled person. So we want to encourage them to join Dateability.
Back here.
Okay, so my question is, I think you mentioned that you guys are going to go into a sort of like you're looking into a subscription model. And then you also mentioned that at least for the most part, it's going to be accessible for free.
Yes.
So I wanted to understand that, because a lot of the dating apps that are out there now, I mean, they do say that it's free, but when you look at it, it's not really free because there are certain features that are closed off to if you're going to be a free subscriber. How are you going to balance that and just make a difference from all the other dating apps that are there that are claiming to provide free services when it's not actually free?
Yeah, that's a great question, because to be honest, neither of us have ever paid for a dating app. So we don't want to ask people to pay for our dating app when they're not going to get a lot out of it. So really, a few components would be for the subscription model is you would be able to travel. And so you could, if you want to find a date in New York City, you can check in New York City from Denver and find a match there. And then you can have some other added features like seeing all of your likes at once, but we'll never limit the amount of swiping you can do. We'll never limit
The number of matches.
the number of matches that you have. So we really want to make it accessible and free because we do know that the disabled community, a lot of people are on a fixed income. So it's really important that even when we do add a subscription model, it's very low cost and
Yeah, there won't
not
be any
that
Tinder
outrageous.
$500 a month subscription models with Dateability. It'll always be affordable as well.
All right, everybody. I think you came to a variety show, and I feel pretty secure in saying you got variety. Would you two be willing to stick around here? So if you want to talk to Alexa and Jacqueline, feel free to come up here. I imagine some of the entrepreneurs, or hopefully all of them, will stick around for a few minutes and take questions. You had some final thoughts. And one thing I just want to mention is if you ever want to reach out to me, I'm Sue at HeySue, like heysue.com. And I'm happy to communicate with anyone here who has a question for me.
Great.